All right, guys. So I just want to say thank you so much for all the love and support that you guys have been showing. I really do appreciate it. Now, Fall actually just dropped another patch a few days after they released Grim and Decker. So quite frankly, let's just get right to it and see what they changed. Here we go. All right. So getting right into it, one of the first things we see, new avatars for the two characters, Decker and for Grim. Super cool. I actually really like that Grim one. I'll probably get them both here in a few moments after I get done with this video. But now it still brings up the question to me. I see Shimby and Crunch avatars in the game. Where are their characters? I don't know. They might be coming soon. All right, moving forward here. Now they changed a few quality of life things, like they added sound effects every time that you grab energy for Boris, making it a little bit easier for you to identify that. And as well, they changed on Grim. So now, depending on what stance you are, the energy tube linked between them two and the projectiles themselves, will now change color prospectively. So that's a good change. I like that, especially with Grim, because you honestly couldn't tell too much what was going on there. Now, as well, they added a sound effect when an enemy hero is revealed by wards. If an enemy is already spotted from another player, the sound effects will not trigger. They finally added ward sounds, guys. You guys hear that? Ward sounds are back. That's a fucking huge quality of lifestyle, especially as a duo main over here. Now, bug fixes, you guys know we don't go over these bug fixes. Quite frankly, you want to know what's there? The stuff that already should have been. So we've gone over all this stuff in the past. Let's move on towards balance. Now, several changes actually happen here. Let's go through these real quick. Now, gold gain buff for everyone, because melee minions now increase gold from 28 to 35. Not bad. Not bad. That's definitely a better quality of life. That means better gold progression as the game goes on. Only on, you know, of course, depending if you get those last hits or not. They did change the Raptor. Now it has 30% physical armor penetration. That's going to be rough. That's definitely going to make it so that Raptors at the early 8-minute mark, it's going to make it so they can actually kind of melt you fairly quickly, because early on you don't really have a lot of armor, so it's going to be able to shed through that early armor quick. So, you know, quality lifestyle, making it a more of a team objective that you're going to need more people there to do. The basic ward that you get, the stealth emblem, now they increased the cooldown by 30 seconds, but they increased the duration by 30 seconds. Having these wards last a full 2 minutes now is amazing. I can't tell you how annoying it was. The fact that you only had those 2 wards and you basically had to save them both for one spot based on cooldowns, yada yada. Not bad. Not bad. I like that quality of life change there. Those extra 30 seconds do go a long way. Now, as far as Radiant Pulse. Now, Radiant Pulse, for those of you that don't know, is basically it's a clearing ward that honestly should be used more specifically by junglers. You can place it down, and beforehand it used to ping within the radius and search for enemy wards so you can deward them. Now it lasts 10 seconds, so you have plenty of time to deward an enemy ward. If you gotta walk on over to it, get distracted, whatever the hell, right? So not a bad quality of life there change for junglers, and other people can use these wards. For example, so supports carrying a Rad Pulse instead of Self Emblem isn't a bad idea, because supports usually run Scrystone as well, and that does give you another ward. So you can have a clearing ward and a normal ward. So worth considering there. Now, Warlock wears blue boots. They got nerfed. Energy penetration per favor got reduced from 0.5 to 0.25. Mana Lens. Now, Mana Lens got a huge nerf. Now, the damage went from 80 to 65. And now instead of scaling damage per favor, now you scale mana per favor. So Mana Lens, basically they transitioned it more towards, hey, people shouldn't be getting this much mana out of a damage item. So they scaled it back and they're like, hey, this is no longer a damage item. It'll give you a little bit, but now it's a mana item. So it'll be interesting to see if casters still want to start with this item first, specifically because now it's more geared towards mana. Now, moving forward here, Energy Cell. Now, Energy Cell builds into Mana Lens. Basically, they just nerfed it and adjusted it as well. They increase the cost, they increase a little bit of the power that it gives you. So just adjusting it a little bit because it builds into Mana Lens. And then Mana Matrix also builds into Mana Lens. You know, they adjusted the power a little bit and then adjusted the cost, you know, prospectively considering the direction that they want the item to go. So for the fact that the earlier items are more expensive, the end game item Mana Lens is still the same cost, but now it gives you different, you know, different properties. So at this point, it just really depends whether you want to run it or not, and whether you want to dedicate that much into mana and just a little bit of power as opposed to all the power you got beforehand. Now moving forward, Apocalyptic Epitome. Health threshold increased from 30 to 40 max health. That's a huge buff. Huge buff. For those of you that don't know, basically this gives you extra damage whenever they're below 30%, but now whenever they're below 40%, you get extra ability damage. That is huge. 40% is a huge chunk. Being able to do that much more significant damage, I can see people running Apocalyptic Epitome a lot sooner than before, as well as with Cursed Remnant. Now, it used to apply trauma whenever you landed an ability. Now it goes from 3 to 4 seconds worth of trauma, and they decrease the cost. So I'm sure a lot of casters are going to be running that one a little bit sooner as well. Now, K Castle got a balance, but I consider it mainly a nerf, because here's the thing, they increased the power by 5, that's okay, but the dash range got reduced from 1200 to 1000. Reducing that dash range, especially for all those carries that like to run this item and use it properly, that's gonna hurt. Like for me, I would have rather had the extra distance and not have the extra damage, because you really grab that item for its utility. So it's interesting there. I mean, the dash is still gonna be good, but a lot of ADCs are gonna have to be very mindful about how they use that dash now, specifically the positioning and all that, because they're right at the edge. Like, let's say you put two range heroes next to each other, 1,000 units is basically right at the edge of basic attack distance. So you got some space, but you're not completely in the clear. You don't have that little bit of extra edge, like, hey, you can't hit me anymore. So that's worth keeping in mind there. Plasma Blade actually got a buff, power increase from 40 to 50. Now, that's a pretty significant buff. That's literally a 25% increase on damage on that one item. I can definitely see people starting to put Plasma Blade as the first 3 items again, because that's actually pretty substantial, and it still gives you pretty decent stats, specifically the passive that comes along. Now, Keen Edge went from 30 to 31, and the Lifesteal from 3 to 5. So interestingly enough, another buff, because Keen Edge builds into Plasma Blade, and it's basically giving you more lifesteal earlier if you have to back at a sooner rate, and you get a little bit more power. Not much, but 1 power sometimes makes the difference. Now as well, Photosynthetic Symbiote, the base health regen you get as 0.6 got increased to 1. That's a pretty good buff, quite frankly, because Photosynthetic Symbiote passive already is bonkers as far as health regen whenever you're out of combat. So the fact that you're giving you extra regen overall, even in combat, that's really not a bad item. Junglers should really consider that item a lot more. And then Goblin Glue. Acidic ammo stacks are increased from 4% physical armor shred to 5. For those of you that don't know Goblin Glue, I know a few of you ADC lovers out there do run this item. You really got to know how to use the item. We might make a build based around it, but essentially, every time that you land your hit, as long as that glue is on them, you shred a percentage of their armor up to a limited stacked amount, excuse me. So if anything, now that it's 5% per armor, that's a huge difference. It really is. I mean, you might not think of it, but let's say like 4 shots easily goes from 16% over to 20%. And considering how much armor, depending on how much armor they have, that can be a real tank killer depending on the situation. Now, moving on to more of a significant change here. Now, they changed Jar of Hearts. They actually changed it. They shifted it more into a tank item with anti-heal, so to speak. Because before, it was basically an attack item with anti-heal. But now, they increased the price by 200 gold. They added 50 energy armor. They reduced the physical power from 35 to 30. They reduced the attack speed from 35 to 20. And they increase the lifesteal from 4 to 5. So as you can see, they increase armor, decrease the damage output, and then increase a little bit of the sustainability. So now it's a lot more viable for solo laners and for junglers specifically, because you still get to build that armor that you're wanting in certain situations, but you're also applying the anti-heal, and the anti-heal is the difference between destroying an ADC that's got crazy lifesteal, or it's the difference between destroying, for example, a Chimera that's just regenerating like crazy. So worth building for sure. Moving forward here, now exotic belt, it's just an adjusted shift because this builds into Jar of Hearts. They increased the cost, they added the energy armor, and actually increased the power here, but reduced the attack speed. So interestingly enough, they increased the gold a little bit because they're adding damage and they're adding armor, but they're reducing the attack speed. So that's not a bad quality of life change there, because for 200 gold, you're getting more than what they're taking away from you. So that's not a bad one there on your way up to Jar of Hearts. It might make it more beneficial to start building into that, because at that point, you got more before you get there, if that makes sense. Moving forward, matter limiter actually got changed from white to blue, and that's a huge buff specifically for Gideon mains, because now you're going to have infinitely stacking power off of blue. You're gonna have infinitely stacking power off of blue, and then on top of that, if you have that Gideon build and you don't want to sacrifice but still get that extra effect out of your ult so they can't run away, matter limiters don't want to build for you. Honestly, this just became a lot more viable instead of just like, hey, we're only building it for the base stats and for the passive. Now you get the infinitely stacking favor on there as well. So that's a huge quality of life change for certain mages there. Now, Cosmic Intervention, this is a neutral item. They decrease the price by 200 and they decrease the armor by 3. That's not bad, but that's honestly not a bad item, guys. Like, a lot of people don't know that that item cleanses you and gives you movement speed for a few seconds. And it has like a 2-minute cooldown. Now, in itself, considering that for 1100, you get armor, you get a cleanse and movement speed, that isn't horrible. I can easily see supports running this item, and I can as hell, sometimes maybe an ADC that's getting fucked up by a mage might have to carry this item until late game and then swap it out for a bigger item later on. But that cleanse, that movement speed, and that armor isn't bad. That's a lot of armor for 1100, guys, let's be honest. Now, moving forward here towards the aspect. Now, Clairvoyant got a buff. Now, Clairvoyant item cooldown reduction increased from 12 to 15. Huge cooldown reduction there on your actives, excuse me. Now, as well, Queen got a nerf that goes from, the damage for every 6 minions goes from 1.5 per every 6 minions to 1. So it literally got like reduced by a third. That's a huge nerf. You guys might not realize it, but at the late game, when you're like 150, 200 minions, that's a huge nerf of power. They're low-key nerfing all casters in that way, and a lot of people were complaining about casters being a bit overtuned, so that's a way to do it there. Now, Templar armor granted to nearby allies increased from 6% to 7%. That means that if you're a support running Templar, you can actually share all the armor that you're building with allies even further. So that's a pretty significant increase, especially if you have a full tank build, right? And then as far as the hero adjustments, now they did buff Boris. Now, the Maul leap distance got increased, percent of basic attack damage dealt per swipe while leaping got increased as well. Under bare necessities, his E, now energy required to activate his canister got reduced. Don't be mindful, now every time that you grab energy, you hear an audible cue, which is nice. If 100 energy is present at the time of activation, 20 energy is left over after use. Excuse me. So basically, if you use the 100 and the ability at 100 energy, you really only use 80 of those. Excuse me. Coffees. Then sorry, my dog, she wants to go outside. I gotta walk her after this. All right, now, jungle buffs now grant 10 energy instead of 2. You guys hear this? If you kill a buff, that's 10 energy. It doesn't count as a normal minion anymore. 10 energy. So already, if you clear red and blue, bam, you already got 20 energy. That's gonna make the bear a lot more viable a lot sooner. So everybody's got to be mindful for that. And the pickup radius increased from 50 to 450 units. You guys hear that? Pickup radius from 50 to 450. That means that the bear will be able to grab all that energy easier. That's a good quality of life change for Boris. I wonder if he's going to be overtuned. I don't think so based off of this, because it's just character use that got a little bit easier, not necessarily much of the stats themselves. So I think this is a very, very good change for Boris. We'll see how that goes. Decker did get buffed though. So Decker, the ion bomb. So the cast time got reduced for 0.3125, which is a very like random arbitrary number, right? To 0.25 seconds. So now you'll be able to cast it faster. It'll now do damage to minions. Now I wonder, does that mean it'll collide with minions, or just does damage to them as it passes through them? That I gotta see. That's a little bit unclear for me. But for now, I'm just gonna assume that it does damage to the minions and the actual orb keeps on going. Now, Ion Bot. Now their blast radius increased from 350 to 390. So not much, but the radius got increased just a tad little bit. That's not bad. And then the Ion Fence. Now, a lot of people did complain that Decker ult, it didn't last too long, especially level 1 at 3 seconds. So now it starts at 4 seconds and it maxes at 6 seconds. 6 seconds, excuse me, 6 seconds stuck in that wall? That's a lot of time. It really is a lot of time. The ion boosters, her right click, her movement speed ability, the horizontal distance traveled got increased from 600 to 750. So you still jump up the same amount, but you actually jump forward even further now. Not a bad quality of life change as well. Now, all this might make her a little bit too OP. We'll see how it goes. I'll definitely try to play her a little bit today. Now, Chimera, just a tiny little buff. On his E, his mana cost got reduced to use his stacks, convert his stacks into damage. That's awesome. Quite frankly, how expensive that was, the damage boost was nice, but sometimes it wasn't even worth it depending on the situation. Now, considering at first level you're 50 and last level you're 90, when before your first level is 80, that's a significant mana decrease. You're going to be seeing a lot more chimeras pop their stacks in order to get that extra damage. That's a very, very good change in my opinion for chimera mains. Quang did get a nerf. It was needed, but I noticed here that Quang got a nerf and it wasn't too crazy. The Quang nerf was more of an adjustment because they still want somebody that builds damage on him to be rewarded to a certain way, because he always have been the tanky caster type. They're not completely going to nerf him. So here's what they did. On his Q, energy power scaling got reduced from 60 to 30, half. So they're making his Q not as substantial, right? Cooldown now starts when the sword is picked up or when you ult. That's when the cooldown starts. So it basically, as soon as you get that sword in your hand, that's when the cooldown starts, which is a significant nerf, because at that point Quang literally his poke is now cut by like more than half, to be honest, because his cooldown isn't starting till much later. Now his E, energy power scaling got reduced from 70 to 60. That's not too bad. That's nothing crazy. His E is that Kamehameha ability that you guys have been seeing. So if anything, it's honestly not too much of a change. You can definitely tell that's like the major damage doer as far as his abilities go. But toning back a lot of that poke and making sure that he has to combo those abilities to do damage, that's a really good quality of life change. His right click power scaling got reduced from 60 to 50. So again, his actual damaging abilities, they tone them back a little bit because they understand that, hey, if somebody wants to build damage on them, they should be rewarded at the expense of them being squishy. That's fine, because that's the way that Quang is designed, but it's scaling a little bit too hard. And I think them nerfing the power scaling on his Q, just throwing the sword, that's huge, because landing that sword was doing way too much damage as is on top of everything else. So that's going to be a pretty significant damage decrease there in total. And then his ultimate powers, the power scaling got reduced from 100 to 90. Not bad. Everything got toned down by about 10%. But then again, his Q got toned down by 50% on that scaling. So not a bad nerf. We're going to see how he goes. Maybe he might be a little bit more balanced now. I'm assuming he's going to be. Let's see how that it actually turns out. Murdock got a light little buff here. His damage increase on his mines went from starting at 50 to 90, and then it still ends at 150. So it might just make it a little bit more beneficial for you to pick up those traps early on. Like, let's say you go buckshot, shield, traps maybe, or you know, a lot of people honestly are gonna go buckshot twice as real Murdock people, but it might honestly be more beneficial now, considering that you can do 90 per trap, and those traps really do get popped a lot. Sometimes they pop them on purpose, and now that you're doing almost double damage, it might be worthwhile to carry. Now, Sparrow, our girl Sparrow got a heavy buff. Now her left mouse button, basically her basic attack damage got increased by 4, and then damage per hero level increased from 3.7 to 4. So now they not only increase her base stats, they increase her base damage scaling. So Sparrow's going to be hitting a lot harder now, guys. That's going to be worth keeping an eye out for. Her Q, her hail of arrows, now damage per take got increased. Level 1, it got tripled. So that's really good poke. It might honestly be beneficial to start using that ability more, in my case, for example, because I barely did before. But then the mana got reduced as well. All the way out, the 5th upgrade is the exact same cost of mana as you had level 1 now. It's definitely better for poking now, in my opinion. Now her E, her marks. Cooldown got decreased significantly, might I add, because from what I see on here, the first cooldown is really close to where it was fully upgraded, so it got decreased significantly. Mana cost got decreased. Now it's 50 at all levels. Now it's barely gonna cost you any mana to use Sparrow, guys. This is a change that she actually needed. And then her passive stack durations increased from 1 second to 2 seconds, guys. Now her stacks last longer. They're actually more viable. Instead of that one Mississippi, oh, you lost your stack. So it's honestly not bad. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I realize this is a little bit of a longer video, just a couple things to go through here. But if anything, I appreciate all love. I appreciate the support. I appreciate that you guys like this video, subscribe, make sure you tune in for content down the road. But until, honestly, as usual, till the next video.